Now, I'm trying now to go around the Crescent. If I've got some of these wrong, please let me know. I don't want to be jumping. I've got a full list here, and we do think there's one or two maybe to be added to it. It was given to Josie Marin had it, and we thank Josie for the list. And it gives more or less every single family who lived in the Crescent from 1949 to the present day, and she lists them all. The one thing is, which is very, very interesting, and it's the same all over the time, I didn't know these people's wives, the mother's first names. Nobody ever knew. You go up there and it was Mrs. Murphy and Mrs. McCarthy and Mrs. Stott, but you never knew what the women's first name. You knew, Paddy Dillon or Benny Murphy or whatever the men's first names were. You never knew. And I was just looking at your mother's name here, and I see their name was Noreen. That right? I never knew that. That's the first time I ever known Mrs. Dillon was called Noreen, because we never call the women by their first names. Now, this is Peter McConnell, of course. Is that his car, or is someone else's car he's leaning on? And it gives a photograph of what the place looks like, and this, of course, is gone round the side there. No, sorry. What am I going here? No, just set up this one. I'm trying now to go for a walk around the Crescent a certain way, and just to go back to the Crescent stores. The Crescent stores, in terms of, was built by McKeown's, was it?
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
But Tommy, this Corcoran man, managed it and ran it for years. And then after that, who was it? Lynch's, sorry, had it. And Morris Lynch. Joe Sullivan had it. After that, Father McGill was living in it today. And Charlie was telling me that there was a ice cream parlour to one side of the shop, a single-story ice cream parlour for a certain number of years. Not something that I remember. And then, of course, the show was in the field. Behind that for years, we went up to the Castleblayney agricultural show. Was in the field behind the Crescent stores. No, no problem. I think Crescent was a great name. Crescent stores is the proper name for the shop. I think Crescent Hill is the wrong name. They could have prevented something more original. They could have used O'Duffy Terrace. Right. So we're now starting. These are the three houses that are in York Street that are paying rent. I haven't photographed the Lakeview houses. Joe McKenna's on the left, which is still Katrina's. Brady's was in the middle, and Dick Kiernan's is the one on the right, which of course became Callum's in later years, then the Garda stations on the other side. And they're the three people who are paying rent in those houses in 1950, 51. These are the two houses in Church Street. McKerney's is on the left, Tommy Cole's on the right. And there are only two houses in Church Street, and they're in the rent book, and they're paying the rent in those two houses. And then, of course, the six houses in Thomas Street. And these are the six houses that were in Thomas Street, and these are the six families who lived in them. The one on the right-hand side at the end was a very unusual house, in that the front door was at the side, in the gable, and there were steps up to it. And when you sat at the front door, and I remember old Mrs. Connor sitting at the front door, you looked straight down Henry Street. Right, you looked down Henry Street rather than out onto Thomas Street. And the families who were there, William O'Connor's Big Bill, isn't it? Pat Irwin's, James Hughes, which is Jim Hughes's, isn't that Pat Hughes's connection? Mary Connor and so on, and then Charles Liddy, of course, the barber, was in the end house. And there were six houses in Thomas Street, again, paying their rents as well. It's slightly older than the Crescent houses. What's unusual with these ones and the ones in York Street, a couple of the houses, the gable comes out from the rest of them, which doesn't happen, I don't think, in the Crescent. They're all level along, yeah. And those were the Thomas Street houses. I didn't photograph Lakeview, though, too many. I was not looking through the whole list of those. And this is, of course, the first list. This is the first set of houses that go across the front of the Crescent. And this is number one, Sean Farrell. And Sean Farrell, Brendan still is in it. Squirty is still in the first house. 2, 3, 4, and Ned Mowens was the last house. Hacker was in the middle house, and so on. And those are the first 5 houses in the Crescent, numbered 1 to 5. Why they started on the right-hand side and went that way? Normally when you read left to right. I thought but they numbered them that way anyway. And then they went around the corner with the numbers. One thing that's missing from this photograph, of course, is Paul Sheila, the telephone box. What was the...
It was on the other side. It was the other side.
Where? Oh, over there at the left.
At
Yeah.
the end of Hopkins.
Yes, on this side. Sorry, the photographs. The telephone box is gone. What was the number?
5-2.
What? 5-2, Charlie. 5-2. We couldn't think of that yesterday. Now, the telephone box was a huge feature in the Crescent, as it was down at the Cozy, the telephone boxes. Because people didn't have telephones in their houses. Now, the number of phone calls that must have gone from that telephone box to hospitals, looking for results of operations, how patients were, looking for, trying to find news. The numbers of people who must have been phoned, emigrants, phoning England, to see whether people in London or in Birmingham and so on okay. That telephone box was a lifeline to the outside world, and people, the number of good stories that must have come through the telephone box, news of weddings and baptisms and births and so on, but also the bad news that came through it, illnesses and deaths and so on that people would have heard. And Charlie remembers times when the phone would ring and the wee boys would come over and answer the phone, and then they'd run down to get the person and take them up and get a penny for getting the person to come up to take the phone call. Because if you got a phone call in it, that was important, right? Now the other one was, of course, girls like Sheila there who were living in the Crescent and so on would spend hours and hours in that telephone box talking to some boy who was in the other telephone box down at Cozy as they were chatting each other up. And the number of phone calls they were made from the Cozy up to the Crescent telephone box and back down to the one in the middle of the main street. Again, its source of communication to the outside world, that phone box alone, was incredible for the people of the Crescent. It's such an important and vital sense of communication. Now, this is the list written by, and I hope some of these are readable. If it's not, and give people a copy here if you want to read them. Sean and Lucy Farrell, and I never knew Mrs. Farrell was called Lucy. Seamus and Anne McShane then were in the second one later on. They weren't in it originally. Tom Flanagan, that's the hacker, and then Cors, and the Mrs. McBride. The Maloneys, Joe Careful, and Joe, people remember the Carvels and all there. And then house number 5, of course, is Edward and Bridget Mohan. And Anna is still in the house today, and that was Mohan's. Now, if you go around the corner, the first one around the corner, and I hope some of these I may have missed as I cut the picture. I was getting a bit of trouble pasting some of these in, whatever was happening with it. But I may have missed, I hope I've got the houses right and the right photographs to go with them. The numbers don't appear, but if you do count just the wee blot on the left-hand side is number 6. Mr. and Mrs. Jimmy Curran, Tommy Catherine and the McCann family, Gannons later on, Tommy Sarah Hughes, Paddy Alice and the Redmond family, and then later Mickey and Eileen Coogan, is that right? That's number 6, 7, 8, 9. 10, Mrs. Sweeney, and then Leo McGrath. That's the Hawk, isn't it? As it was called. The Hawk McGraths are in the next one. Followed by Jimmy and Irene Duffy, and Tom and Magella O'Connor maybe today, is that right? Not 100% sure exactly if these people are in it today in 2040. You go on down, Joe and Margaret Cumiskin and the Addisons were there. 12, the Mulhollands. Not Originals were there later on. Fogarty's, Pat and Kathleen Donaghy, followed by Fergal Duffy, and then number 15, Margaret O'Connor, James Maggie, and Minnie O'Connor, and that's the O'Connors. And so you count down then as you go along 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, and it's all down that side of the street. Now, as you go towards the end of it, and again, I hope I didn't cut somebody out of this, Bernard Donna Macaulay family. 20 was Pete, Molly, McConnon, Jerry's connection. And I think is 22 the last house? The Christie and the Lamb.
21.
Sorry? 21 is the last one. Okay. 21 is the last one. Sorry, there is 21 there. Sorry, that's number 21. The Christie and the Lamb family, Pat Lamb, and somebody now, Pauline Jennifer Conley, isn't it? No. remember Pat Lamb and so on was there. And then, of course, you go around the corner. Sorry, these were my mistake. This was one that went wrong. Go back to number 6. Harry Cole. This Harry Cole man was in number 6. Sarah McCann family, Kevin, Sadie, were in number 7. Is that right?
Maybe 16 and 17.
That's 16 and 17. Yes. And 18 then was Nan McCardley. Was that? Martin?
The one we didn't know.
No, we didn't know. Yes, yeah. Eamon Mallon is in it there. Phil Giblin is in it.
Phil Giblin was in it for a couple.
Yes, for a while. And Geraldine Leonard. Sorry, yeah. Sorry, I pasted those the wrong way around. The first one, that last one should have come up first, and the other one then the second. Going from number 16 down to 21 down that side of the street, and you're now then at the bottom of the street. You then turn to come round, and the two houses that are facing the other direction, if you know what I mean. And the people who were in that, one was Jack, Annie, and Patsy Duffy. That right? Patsy Margaret Duffy, Paul Ford. And then, no, Josie Martin made one mistake. She says 23 is Mr. and Mrs. Sam Ford. That should be Sam Cross. The Fords were in the previous house. And then it becomes P.T. Welsh, correct? And Paddy and Michelle Martin then are in at a later stage. People who know these people. We don't know the modern people as well as we know the previous generations. And they were those two separate houses to themselves as you go around the corner. And now you're coming down the other side, coming up back towards the Crescent stores. If Andy and Vera Clark were the first one, of course Nigel is still there. McShane family in the next one. Peter Comiskey, is that Comiskey's? Do you know that connection? No. Frank, Nora, and the Duffy family. It's 27. 28, John Flanagan, and then the Burtons. Were they 20? Burtons are 28. Yes. 29, Tommy McAviney. Derek Wallace, that was in that later on. Peter Rooney is in 30. And then moves, of course, to Thomas Street. 31 is Paddy Rita McInerney. They moved to the Market House. That is Paddy of the Market House, Willie's father. All right, right. And after Mrs. Phelan, and then on down.
Mrs. Phelan,
yeah.
She taught in the secondary school.
Right.
And she's British.
She was there.
Yeah.
32, Paddy McNeil, the printer, Pat's father. And then, of course, 33, the barber himself, Jamesy McNeil, Bubbles. That right? And 30, and they were all down that right-hand side. Now, as I say, I may have cut the photographs a bit tight in some of these, when that house might be missing from it. And then you keep going on down that side of the street, and you have the Loftus family. Two Loftus's families originally. Harry McQuillan went into the first Loftus house, which would be number 34, right? And he's noted going in the summer of 1950. 35, Loftus, later becomes Charlie Auckland's. 36, Eddie O'Connor. 37, Conlon's. 38, Comiskey's. Points, as later on was. Ailish Duffy. 40 was Des McGlynn, that was the house that he was in. And later becomes Tommy Lally Hughes were in that one. 41 then, the second last one was, or the last one if you like in that line, because the last one is attached to Sean Fowler's at the end, was James Sullivan, Dickie Sullivan of course, and Rosaline, some of them may be still in it. And the Murrays then were in the last house as you go up that left hand, as you go up that side. Now, this is a photograph now taken from the other side, and it shows you the extra one house there at the end, which was Murray's, and it was attached to Sean Farrell's, which was number 1. So 42 and 1 were part of the same attachment. And they're the ones who went down that side of the street. Now we're on the other side of the street going down again. I may have cut the photograph a bit tight. The Hopkins family, Jim Donaghy, Des Kiernan, and family. Hilda's name I would have known. Joe McElroy first, and then of course Flemings were in that afterwards. Is that Nan McArdle then? That's Martin's mother, and Brian and those, and Anne, and yeah, and her husband Mike, he was married twice. Martin McArdle's father was married twice, and his headstone's up in the graveyard. He's got two women, he's got two wives in the headstone actually, and Nan was there. Ryan McDonough was the Carley house. That was one name that we added in there. Carley's were 48, were they? And 49 then Barney Jemmy Connor. James McCole was in that house a while, the guard, McCole's. And then Hineses were in it, and people would remember Anne and what was those just called? Names escaped me. And you keep going on down, heading down towards the end. Again, I don't know whether I've got this off correctly or not. Peter and Patricia McManus, Jimmy Dorsley, Kevin and Rita Comiskey. Well, that's Kevin Cummins of the post office, who eventually comes down to the square here. Frank Fleming, the other Flemings, is Frank Hughes, and then number 63 at the bottom, Joe and Sarah Duffy. Jimmy, Irene, Duffy and family were down that side, were they? They went on down as you go on. Now, some of these houses, if you look at the first one, you see it's a 4-block unit. And then you have a 2-block unit, and you have 2 block units, and you have 3 block units, and only the 2 single ones, of course, as you go around the other side. Now, as you go on down here, when Jimmy Dorsley, Kevin Comiskey, and so on, this is in addition to the previous list, getting in Eddie Murphy, 63, as you go down that side, was McCarthy's, is that right? Then Eddie Murphy's is the first one after you go round the bend, isn't it? It's the first of the block facing you. Tommy Kathleen McCardle and the Kelly family, and then Paddy Ehrman. Now, I tried to do some of these lists, and as I say, I got some of these in the wrong order. This is back at the start again. There's my 2 slides are in the wrong order there. Michael and Margaret McCardle, Christy Lockman, Ollie King, Benny Murphy, Brendan Clifford, Mrs. Tommy Hanergy, Murphys, and then the Murray family, of course. Now, Mick Gagan is in that, the butcher, was there for a while as well. And he's there, and that's 58, and you're going down that side. And then you go across the houses at the bottom. 65 is Brian, the Pro Duffy. Margaret is still there. Apologies, the Finns are the next one. Yeah, it didn't come out too clearly. Tommy Hughes, Mr. and Mrs. Tommy Mallon, Mr. and Mrs. Garrity, Michael Eddie Murphy, and then in 72, the single house at the end, John MacDonald, later on Mallon's, and of course PJ Ward is there today. And of course PJ has, because he had a single house, he was able to put the extension on, and his is now a different design from all of the other houses. And as you move through the Crescent, there are so many stories, and you have to go around and look at all of those houses. And the people who come from the Crescent, this will be your mind. I'll try and clear up a couple of those that are a wee bit fussy at the end and get my order right again. But I hope when we do go online next week that you'll be able to read all of the names that are there. The one thing we haven't put in most of these, people have, of course, the children. And the question is, who was the first child born in the Crescent? I have no idea. There must have been a first one, right? And if we could possibly look up baptisms in the church to see the first child born in the Crescent in early 1950, it would have been. Or if anybody here was that 50 and knows people from the Crescent or of that era, could maybe name. We would not want to ask in particular who was the first person to die in the Crescent. Though obviously there must have been a funeral. And of course the funerals which came from the Crescent, people of the Crescent would go to the house and they would walk. But of course people from the town of us, we didn't go out to the country, to the place like that. We were down at Bogues' Corner. And you stand at Bogues' Corner to wait and collect, and the number of funerals that must have come out of the Crescent in all in the 75 years must have been, and the number of tragedies, and I didn't want to go into too much to the tragedies. Of course, Jimmy Dorsley was killed in a car crash, and probably there were maybe a number of other tragedies that were serious to them all. And people who are there now must have stories that they can add. Ones that we can't repeat because this is going to go online. If you have a really good scandal, could you pass it on to us? And to the people of the Crescent, now I do see this morning that there's some sort of a silly group in this room across the street from us. Now I know the librarian here, Louisa, is interested in maybe trying that possibly sometime if we get a display for the Crescent, if possible with a photograph of every family, and I think that across the street, the other gatehouse, if you know what I mean, would be a great place for those sort of photographic displays. And certainly it would be possible to get a photograph of everybody who lived in the Crescent. Well, you could get tightly close to it, because of course we all had cameras from the 50s onwards, so there must be family photographs, if only wedding photographs or parties or whatever they are, and to get them all sort of put together, because when we go looking for them, people don't seem to have that many of them, apart from family photographs, and we would certainly like them to be there. And as we come towards the end here, we're heading now for 12:30. Anyone want to make a contribution to the Crescent, or something that they remember the playing? Charlie remembers Beatty's taking hay off the field next door to the Crescent and going in and helping to throw up the hay. Beatty's field was next. Sorry? And the people who were in those sort of areas.
I remember the babies coming up actually and parking at the gate and all this. They would actually milk the cows at the gate.
At the gate, yes. And no, that's what the fields were originally in Murray. Yeah, people kept cattle in them, and they milked them when milk wasn't available, as it would be today. People had their own cows and did milk their own cows and took hay off them and took oats off them and took, and then of course when the Crescent came, the people who had the adjoining fields continued to use them as agricultural fields. I'm sure there's an outbuy in there causing trouble to them and tramping down the crops and so on. And now, as we go on, first of all, thank you all for coming here this morning. I would ask a question of myself and say, did the Crescent make a positive contribution to the town? And I think the answer is yes, without a shadow of doubt. Even if it's only footballers, but not alone that. We talked about where did the boys work. How many of those men on that original list worked, say, in the boot factory? Now, Eddie O'Connor was in the boot factory and then went to Dundalk to, was it Clark's in Dundalk, wherever the boot factory was there. And the numbers then who worked, of course, in McElroy's would be considerable. And the numbers who worked in the quarry, there will be a number of those as well who were quarry workers, but also too the numbers who came down to town and ran businesses. Well, Jimmy McNeil is a barber alone, but many of the other people had and were tradesmen, contribute. It is a positive contribution, maybe a not negative one, but generally speaking, the people of the Crescent made a huge positive contribution to the town. The question now is, did the Crescent make a positive contribution to the individuals who live there? And the question would be, if you had a chance to go back and live the last 40 years, those who maybe were still in the Crescent, would you go back and live those years again? And I think you would.
Absolutely. I would say we had a good time.
Yes. It was. No, there were problems, and I'm not saying there weren't. There were sad times in it as well, and there would have been good times in it, and there would have been sad times in it as well. And you can't. Now, for me as an outsider, and all of those who are outsiders, we would probably quote the great words of Mike Scott, the legendary Mike Scott, where he said, "I saw the Crescent, you saw the whole of the moon." Right? And coming back now to our next talk, we're skipping December. It's a little bit too close to Christmas, and we'll give people a rest now in December. We will be back in January. We're going in December, again, to quote the other great singer-songwriter, Joni, right? They're cutting down trees, they're putting up reindeer, singing songs of joy and peace, and I'm looking for a river I can skate away on. We'll avoid the Christmas one. I hope you enjoyed that talk. I hope I provided, and what we're trying to provide here is not a full-scale history of the Crescent. It's a little flavour, it's a little snippet, and it's given you maybe, I hope, little bits of information. And it's up to you to add to it. You know, get the photographs, get people to collect photographs, start a wee collection of photographs. Try and put children into these houses, because we don't have, and if some of the women are down as Mrs., whatever they are, I never knew. As I say, Michal's mother was Noreen, I had no idea. Sean Farrell's wife was Lucy. And I'm looking at all these names, my God, who are they? Vera Clark. I didn't know. And you do learn a little bit.
I just wanted to add, we just visited him. My father worked on the building of the Crescent.
Right.
Yeah, and we were coming over, we came over by boat last night, and just before I left home I found his...
You came especially for this?
Sorry?
You
no, I went to see my uncle down.
Yeah,
of course I did, yeah.
Yes.
But we're going to visit my uncle in Brooklyn.
Yes.
But we've seen my sister seen it on Facebook, so I've been to one of your lectures here before.
Yes.
But yeah, he worked, and I found his union card, the contractor he worked for.
He worked for.
And it was, I always remember Dad talking about the guy, Paddy Green. I don't know whether he lived in
the Crescent. I think Paddy Green lived in the Crescent. No.
The filling station above.
No.
Anyway, I found his union card.
As well. Those are the sort of things that we have to keep.
Yeah.
You know.
He worked on the building now. I just wanted to say that.
Right.
And I'm sure, you were looking for photographs. I'm sure amongst the Blayney diaspora like us,
all over the world,
photographs of people coming over on holiday and
Yes.
staying with the relations.
And coming to the Crescent. The number of people who are in England, there must be quite a lot of ex-Crescent people between London and Birmingham, places, and elsewhere in the world. Charlie told me a great story yesterday about when they were repairing their house, right? And they got in Martin Fleming to go up to the attic. It was very strange. They were doing up the attic. And a young lad working for Martin Fleming was one of the Eccles. Is that right? First name. The young Eccles lad from Cromartin. And he was working for Martin Fleming, and up he went, and he was in the attic. And they found this old Players Please packet, right? And there was a name on the Players Please packet of a man who had worked on the building of the houses in 1949-50. Jimmy Eccles. And it was the young fellow's grandfather whose name was on this.
He was a carpenter. Jimmy was a carpenter.
Was a carpenter, yeah, and he must have worked in the houses and wrote his name on this thing, and it was there, and was there for 75 years or whatever, 70 years. And the person who found it was his grandson, which again was an amazing coincidence. Right. So, thank you very much for being here. Hope you enjoyed that.